Hello everyone and welcome to Nervous Nessie. This is the third video in my Travel Medical Emergencies series where I talk about medical emergencies that happened while I have been traveling. And I'm giving you some tips and ideas of how to handle crazy medical emergencies that can come up while you're traveling. Now, this one is definitely a freak accident. Some of you may say I had it coming to me, but it was an accident. It was about 12, 13 years ago. I had moved to California and had been living here for a few months, and I decided I wanted to go back to my hometown and visit my family for the holidays. And I ended up going back, and there was a local sports bar that I frequented before I moved to California. And all of my friends went to this sports bar. So I knew that by going there, I would get to see all of my friends and visit with them while I was in town. And just so happens that the night that I ended up going to the sports bar, they ended up having a sumo competition. That's right, you heard me right. A sumo competition where you put on the big sumo suits and you end up wrestling and fighting with someone else. And I love trying new things. I love doing crazy things. So when I saw this, I was like, yeah, sign me up. I want to do this. Little did I know what was about to happen. The way that this competition worked was they would draw out a name and another name, you would go head to head. Best out of 3 rounds, you move to the next round. And then you go up against someone else until everyone is eliminated, and whoever won would end up getting, I think, their bar tab taken care of up to a certain dollar amount. And so I put on the suit, and this is actually a picture of me in the suit at the beginning of the competition. And I put on the suit, put on the helmet, and tightened the helmet up. I ended up going round after round after round and moving my way up. I finally made it to the final round. I'm going up against this guy that is at least a foot taller than me. He looks like a football linebacker, huge guy. And I'm just thinking, I've got to make it through 3 rounds. Well, round 1, first round, we go at each other, he comes at me, and I get knocked over. Okay, so I lost round 1. Round 2, his friend got on all fours behind him and kind of motioned for me to come on. That way, when I went towards him and hit him, he would trip over his friend and fall, and I would win, which is what happened. So I made it through round 2. We're even, 1-1. It's the final one. It's the final winner takes all. And of course, I decided to do some trash talking, and I tightened up as tight as I could the helmet on my head and was, bring it on. And he brought it. He came at me like a linebacker, and we bumped. And normally, because you're in these big suits, when you fall, you've got all this padding that you're falling on. However, this was one of those freak accidents. When he hit me, I went back and I actually cleared the mat that we were wrestling on. And when I went back, the force of me going back, my helmet came off of my head. So I go back and my helmet comes off, and because I had cleared the mat, my head hit the concrete on the floor. I woke up, I was told probably about 5 minutes later, completely knocked me out. And by that time, the suit had already been taken off of me. I've got a crowd of people around me. I'm dizzy, have excruciating head pain, have no idea what's going on. I reach to the back of my head to feel where the worst part of the pain is, and already there is this huge knot on the back of my head. And I'm like, this is not good. Now, I get up, I try to be tough. I'm like, I'll be fine. I'm just a little dizzy. I'll be fine. And so I go back to where all of my friends are sitting. We're sitting in a booth together and we're talking about it. For the record, the guy that I was in the competition that was the one who hit me did come over and check on me. He was worried about me. But I'm sitting there with my friends, and as I'm sitting there, I'm passing out. I'm literally slumping over and passing out. Luckily, one of my friends is a nurse, and she said, no, something's wrong. I think she has a concussion. And so they threw me in the back seat of the car. Had one friend driving. She was actually in the car with us and called ahead to the emergency room and said what had happened to me. And we raced to the emergency room. They took me immediately back. They put me on the board, put the neck brace on me, strapped me down because they had no idea what the extent of my injury was. And all I remember was, number one, I was in and out of consciousness the entire time. I kept passing out, waking up, passing out, waking up. I remember I was throwing up a lot. They would have to roll the board to my side so I could throw up. And I remember being in excruciating pain. And of course, all of this is clear signs of having a severe concussion. You have the dizziness, you do pass out or black out, and you can be very nauseous and throw up. In the end, turns out I had fractured my skull right here, right here on the back. I had fractured my skull. And the doctors said that to fracture your skull is a really hard hit. It's easy to break fingers, toes, legs, arms, your limbs, even a rib. But to fracture your skull, you do have to have a very hard hit, which I did. The next day, I was supposed to fly back to California. And it was a rough night. I was in and out of sleep. I couldn't sleep well. I was throwing up. I was dizzy. I was weak. I felt horrible. But all I wanted to do was be back home in California and be in my own bed and just be away from everyone else and get the rest that I needed. So ended up driving back to the airport to try and fly back home. Because I was so weak, when I got to the airport, my friend got me in a wheelchair. I actually still had one of the vomit bags, clean one, from the emergency room because I was still nauseous. I didn't want to throw up on myself, so they gave me one of those bags to carry just in case. And I'm sitting there looking like I've been hit by a car. And I get wheeled up to the gate where they are taking my luggage and everything. And the person at the airline was like, "What is wrong with her?" Like, she doesn't look well. Why is she in a wheelchair and looks really bad? And we said, "Oh, she had a head injury." Now, there are two very, very 100% surefire ways to get on TSA's no-fly list. Number one, to be a pain and create a problem with the airlines. You've heard of people causing fights and whatnot on the plane. That's a good way to get on TSA's no-fly list. The second way is to have a head injury. The reason why is when you go up to the high altitudes, the pressure from those altitudes, if you've had a head injury, it can create massive problems. It can create more pressure on your brain, can create bleeding, it can do a lot of damage to you. And so if you have recently had a head injury, they will not let you fly. No airline will let you fly. And so I got put on the no-fly list. Now, to get taken off the no-fly list, it meant that I was going to have to get a note from the doctor from the emergency room releasing me and saying that I'm okay to fly. Because my flight was in like 2 hours from when I arrived at the airport, there was no way I was going to be able to get that note. So I ended up having to get a hotel room. Luckily, the airline was very nice and they ended up rebooking my flight for the next day, just so I wouldn't lose the money and I would still have a flight potentially. Ended up getting a hotel room not far from the airport and spending the night there, but spending all of the time on the phone, calling the emergency room, trying to find the doctor that treated me and get a letter from that doctor sent to my hotel. That way I could take it to the airline and show that I was able to fly. Luckily I did, after a lot of phone calls and cooperation with the hotel. I was able to get that letter and take it to the airline the next day and make my flight home. But it meant me having to call my work and say, "I can't come in because I missed my flight. This is what's going on. And I'm going to need to take several days off work to heal because I'm in a wheelchair. I can't even walk. I'm so out of it." Was not expecting that at all with that trip. Everything else with the trip was great, and everything leading up to it, even the sumo competition, was a lot of fun. But I was not expecting something that severe to happen during the trip. And it was scary. It was painful. It was one of the worst pains I've ever been through. I've broken a toe and, finger and stuff like that, but you break your skull, that hurts. It is a whole other level of pain, which I'm fine. I mean, it healed. It took a while, but it finally healed. I wanted to share that story with you because I know it's very tempting when you go on trips to do the extreme stuff, the adventurous stuff. Maybe you want to go skydiving. Maybe you want to bungee jump off the bridge, or you want to, do different crazy things you've never done before, which is fine. I've done many different things like that. But know that there could be a freak accident like that. And one way to, I guess you could say, prepare yourself just in case for the worst case scenario is to get travel insurance. I always get travel insurance. I know a lot of people don't believe in it, but as you've seen in this medical series, anything can happen. And I fully believe in spending the money. It's not that expensive to cover your trip. It can cover things from flight delays, needing to get an extra hotel night because of a delay. It can cover some medical emergencies. Obviously, you want to read the travel insurance plan to find out what is covered. And you might have to buy travel insurance in addition to like your personal travel insurance. So when you book a flight, they give you the option to buy travel insurance for the flight. You can book a hotel and it'll ask if you want travel insurance for the hotel. But you can also go to a travel insurance company and get travel insurance for the whole trip. And that will include medical emergencies. It could be med flights if you are traveling to a remote location. I know when I was in Alaska, they said that if you're doing certain tours, you must purchase the travel insurance because everything is so remote in Alaska, and to get to an emergency room, you're going to have to be med flight into the emergency room. They don't just throw you in an ambulance. You have to actually be flown to the emergency room. And so they require you to buy travel insurance to cover that. I would say that travel insurance is worth it. Even if you don't have a medical emergency, just the peace of mind to know that you're covered in case something happens. That kind of makes your trip a little more enjoyable to know that you are covered in a worst case scenario. Now, I know that not everyone is crazy or stupid enough to get in a sumo competition and fracture their skull. A lot of people just travel like normal people and don't do extreme things. But if you think that you might want to do some of the extreme things, or even if you just want to travel, know that worst case scenario things can happen, and try to be prepared for that just in case. I hope by me sharing this story, it'll give you some things to think about before you book your next trip. And I have one more medical travel emergency story for you, which I will share in my next video. If you want to find out when that video comes out, then subscribe and feel free to leave any comments or questions below. I will try to get to those as soon as I can. And I look forward to seeing everyone in the next video. Bye!